Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Nerds Drink Whiskey. We're sitting here at Chambers Bay Distillery, and what's your name?
I am the owner, Jeff Robinette, with my partner Alan Davis in the back there, but I'm serving the straight bourbon whiskey. Minimum 3 years old. It's fabulous. I can't wait for you guys to taste it.
All right. So, have you ever been to an event like this?
I don't think I've. The only other distillery that I've been to was Blind Pig, or the distillery formerly known as Blind Pig.
Yeah.
But
Shoebox, I think.
Oh, Shoebox now. Yeah. Actually, I need to get back down there and buy some of their stuff. But yeah, no. This is their new release party for. Is this the new
Chambers Bay straight bourbon
whiskey? Yeah. Straight bourbon. And so, what other things do you have?
Well, so if you go back a couple years to the proof event in 2015, possibly, you'd have to dig up that in the archives. I don't know if you still have it out there, but the Greenhorn Nerds rated us best of show at that particular event. We were the best, and that was only our 17 to 20 month old. And so, what makes our whiskey remarkably smooth is our ocean aging. So that's the novel part of our recipe, or our aging process. We age our barrels in a floating boathouse down about a mile away, down on Puget Sound. So our boathouse is literally floating on the water, agitating their barrels 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Oh, sorry. I like to use my hands when I talk a lot, so I'm going to have to. Okay, all right. So our young bourbon was really well received. Won a gold medal at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. That was probably after you guys had even tasted it that it won the gold medal at San Francisco. So the Greenhorn bourbon was really well received. It's we can't keep it in stock, but we did also. But let's go back, and the Greenhorn's aged in 20-liter barrels, so small barrels like these guys right behind you here. Obviously, the younger the bourbon, the smaller your barrel should be, in my opinion. We find a lot of people age in large barrels and still launch a product, within 6 months to a year and a half. And you can't possibly get the flavor that you would want to get from a smaller barrel like this. So, small barrels, which isn't novel necessarily. A lot of people use small barrels. That's pretty common in the micro distillery world. But the aging on the water, the exposing your barrels to the elements as much as you can. The boathouse down there is thin-walled, steel. It's the same temperature outside as it is inside. So when it's hot inside. When it's cold outside, it's cold outside. It's all about that, moving that whiskey in and out of the wood with temperature changes. So if you're keeping your barrels stored in a warehouse somewhere that's insulated or temperature controlled, you're not aging your whiskey properly, in my opinion. So we're doing it the right way as far as aging it, exposing it to the elements as much as we possibly can. And then after that, it's just a matter of the size of the barrel and the time that it's spent in the boathouse. And the boathouse, even when the temperatures are not fluctuating a lot, like in the wintertime, at least our barrels are rocking on the waves, sloshing that whiskey around, allowing those molecules to sort of come together, when they otherwise would not be, just sitting absolutely still in a warehouse somewhere. So it's all about settling in those things together.
This is also aged in the boathouse?
Right. This is also aged in the boathouse. Bigger barrels, however. We haven't used a 53-gallon barrel. This is your standard Kentucky-sized barrel here. We just got this for show, basically. We might fill it up at the end of the year and try to do a 10-year or something like that in one of these guys. But the barrels that you see outside when you came in, those are the 25-gallon barrels that we actually do the straight bourbon in. Straight bourbon just means it has to be aged for a minimum of 2 years in the barrel. These are all aged a minimum of 3 years. We wanted at least a full year between our Greenhorn and our straight bourbon. So I think you're going to find, if you compare our two bottles, the Greenhorn is going to be a shade lighter, and this is going to be considerably darker. You can tell just by sitting them next to each other on the shelf. A lot of guys will add coloring to make the older stuff look darker if they haven't. I know Jim Beam does that with a little bit of few of their products. Their younger stuff sometimes is just as dark as the ones that are just a little bit older, and so they darken them up a little bit. So the younger stuff is lighter, and the older stuff is darker, which it should be if everything is working properly. But and so it's fabulous. I mean, this is richer. It's got a little more depth than the original stuff, but the Greenhorn, that is. But it's the same exact mash bill. It's just a matter of size of barrel and time spent in the barrel.
Okay. Now, one thing we love to make fun of is just like in you're pouring. I'm gonna get this question ready, but just like if you ever seen those commercials where they talk about your salsa is made in New York City. Well, in whiskey we have your whiskey was distilled in Indiana. So all fake whiskeys are distilled in Indiana. So to be clear, your whiskey is distilled where?
Absolutely, right here in this room. So our little still is right behind us. Everything we make, as far as the whiskey and the bourbon, comes off of our own still. So it's grain to bottle right in the on premises right here. So this is the ultimate Puget Sound bourbon that you'll ever find. So and I hopefully you guys will find it be the most satisfying as well.
Why don't you take the mic while we take a sip?
Yeah. And we might have to compare the Greenhorn at some point so you guys can remember what it tasted like.
And remember, our slogan is always sip, never slam.
I couldn't agree more. So I hope you'll find it nice and rich. A lot of flavor to it. It's got some good depth.
What is the proof on this?
95. Yeah. Our Greenhorn is 88 proof, so you'll notice it's a little bit lighter, maybe a tad sweeter of the Greenhorn, but this has got a. And my biggest thing with whiskey is I want it to be smooth. I don't want to release something before it's lost its young edge. And even our young stuff actually was remarkably smooth.
So. The initial, it's very sweet on the tongue. So your taste, very sweet taste. It's got, like, while you got the sweet coming in at first, you've also got in the back, you've got this kind of a bite coming in. So the two are seem to be fighting each other. And then the finish, the bite is actually quite hefty, but without being. It's almost bordering on burn, but not quite there. It's just a really strong bite.
Right. And that's what we hope is the proof versus it's not necessarily elements of youngness that are causing that. It's just the high proof we hope that's causing that little bit of, burn that you get on the finish. Because I find that it really rounds out nicely as far as instead of getting a sharp bite on your tongue, as far as youngness versus proof. There's a subtle difference there, in my opinion, that as long as it rounds out as it's going down your throat, that makes the finish sort of quite smooth, in my opinion, too.
So it's kind of that balance of making sure that the mouthfeel is still pleasant, but the bite is still strong, and keeping that balance. If you have a cheap whiskey, the mouthfeel is kind of acidic, whereas this is you've got a good mouthfeel, but you've got a very strong, bold finish. Right, so what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like the flavor on it, and it's pretty heavy flavor, which
it's
considering heavy. Which a lot we've done a lot of these, and a lot of bourbons are kind of that's whiskey, but I couldn't tell you why it's this whiskey over that whiskey.
Right.
So I think the way yours stands out is that there's a lot of complex flavors in there, which a lot of whiskeys it's just it's a whiskey, but it's not all that interesting.
Right, and that's what I like. That's why you guys should actually try the Greenhorn again. I'll try to bring a bottle of that back here, maybe compare the two. But the grains. The mash bills, like I said, were the same, but you'll see the difference in proof, and then the heaviness, the lightness of the Greenhorn because it's at 88 proof and it's not aged as long, versus the longer aged straight bourbon. There's a heaviness to it. Exactly, I completely agree. And I don't know if you guys can pick up a little bit of the sea salt finish. Did that come up?
You can't talk in the I know. So was it Old Pulteney, or which one was Old Pulteney? Which that one essentially, it's on the Scottish Isles by the sea, and it does remind me a bit of that one, with that kind of sea air flavor in your mouth.
Right.
But the Old Pulteney, I believe, if we could look it up, but I believe that was like a 20-year-old. That was like a 20-year-old Scotch, sailor Scotch, whereas this is aged, you said, about 3 years?
Yeah, 3 to 3.5 years old, yeah. So, and then, guys with finer palates than mine have been able to pick up, without knowing where we age our stuff, have been able to pick up the sea salt on the finish. So they ask, I've had a couple people ask, when we've been serving it to them blindly, that, asked, do you age this somewhere near the ocean? And we said, well, you're absolutely right, over the ocean. So yeah, you're right on. So there is a subtle sea salt finish that is absorbed into the barrels just naturally because of the proximity to Puget Sound. Yeah.
Okay. Now that Old Pulteney, if I remember, was about $300 a bottle. How much? Because like I said, 20 years. What's the price on one of your bottles here?
The new stuff is $37.50 a bottle, so that's for $3.75 though. So, but we tried to keep it in range in the craft world, not without outpricing ourselves. But so the Greenhorn is $27.50, $10 more for the heavier, higher proof, longer aged straight bourbon. Yeah,
that's actually pretty reasonably priced for a good bottle of whiskey.
And hopefully, maybe scarcity at some point. If we begin to run out, if it begins to sell really well, it might dictate what the price ends up being at some point. But right now, I'd say get your hands on it at $37.50. Yeah, because I think it's going to run out pretty quick. And the next batch probably won't come out. We got to make this last or run out until. We got about 3 months before we got any more that are going to be in this wheelhouse as well. So, yeah, I'd say get your hands on it now if you can.
All right. Yeah. Cool. Anybody have any final words? Any things that they really want to say? No? Okay. All right. Well, this is you have nothing? No? Okay. Well, we're gonna close out here, but before we close out, we know Christmas is coming, and we know that a lot of you guys, maybe the pocketbook's a little tight. So,
even for that Thanksgiving dinner.
Right. You could get that, or what we're doing is we're giving away a $5 gift certificate to Amazon.com, and all it is the best comment of the week. So whoever is the best comment of the week on our Facebook page of this episode, just go and comment below what you think, any of your thoughts. Prove that you've watched the episode. What's the key word they should include in their post to prove that they watched the episode?
Let's go Boathouse.
Include the word Boathouse in your post, and let's just say, you know what? I'm going to change it up a little bit. The first person to include the word Boathouse in their post, go. See you next week.